All right, so it's, I'm not sure what time, but it's time to call this meeting to order. So there's
Roll call.
two,
Roll call.
four of us members, and so we'll do a roll call
Okay.
to make sure.
Megan McGinty, Grace Mitchell, Mikhail Lebinsky,
Present.
Scott Dossick, Ricardo Diaz,
Here.
Darius White, Daryl Price.
Present.
Okay, for all purposes, I think 4 people enable us to keep going.
We have a quorum.
Yeah, so we have a quorum. Any changes to the agenda? Anything that you see guys pending? No changes? So I don't think we have to vote on that, so we just keep on.
You need to vote on it.
We need a vote to
Just go ahead
approve
and-
agenda?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Mikhail, what do you?
I move that we approve the agenda as submitted to us.
Second.
Excellent. Any discussion? No? Everybody in agreement, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. So let's go on to the minutes. Our last meeting was July 24th. Hope we've had everybody had a chance to read it. We got them beforehand. Any discussion on them?
No.
Okay. So can I have a motion to approve them as submitted? Oh, there is.
I believe we just did. didn't we?
Nope, for the minutes. Go ahead.
This agenda.
That was
excuse me.
today's agenda,
Yes.
then the
So moved.
the July meeting. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? No? So let's go ahead. All in agreement, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And so now we start public participation. Members of the public, would you like to address the group? Please. Yes. Please come up to the mic, your name and address. There's a time limit, but we've got enough room in the agenda that you're perfectly free to.
Good evening.
Hi.
My name is Emily Close. I live in Champaign. I have been involved in the complaint process in the town of Champaign since end of May 2018. I have filed 3 complaints. My experience with Champaign's Citizen Review Subcommittee is that the complaints are not handled properly by the police. And last night I was at a city council meeting, a study session, and I'm finding it really discouraging that, in my opinion, in Champaign, neither the city council nor the city manager nor the police department are really behind the citizens that this is supposed to work for. This complaint process was born by the death of Kawan Carrington 10 years ago. And even though the community had been trying to get the city council to get behind the Citizen Review Board since 1998, it didn't happen, even with the death of that boy. It happened a few years later when there was a white police officer, Matthew Rush, and his egregious conduct. That's when they finally got on board. So I am somewhat disappointed in your process. I thought I understood it, but when I really sat down and looked at it, it's not that different from Champaign's. The only time the Civilian Review Board gets involved is if somebody appeals the result. That's, again, I think that's too much mystery and secrecy and behind closed doors. That's the police investigating the police. I don't think that works. I don't think that's working in Champaign. We brought 4 recommendations, not me, but the subcommittee has brought 4 recommendations before Chief Cobb at a meeting, the date and time of which he chose in August. And he hasn't responded at all about what he's going to do to those recommendations. It's extremely frustrating, and I'm not going to be silenced. I'm going to keep coming to these meetings. I've been to one in Danville. I know that Bloomington has a citizen review board, but I think that the crux of the problem is you will never have trust with the community if the police keep investigating themselves, doing internal investigations. You will never have it. So I would like you to look at your own system, and I know there's several models, and find one that's better. You
Ms.
need to
Close?
find one that's better.
Yeah, Ms. Close, how do you see the parallels, or what is it that you'd see in our review board in Urbana parallel that would have the same
Yeah.
issues, or?
Yeah, you're blocking the
Champaign.
citizen from meaningful participation. The police investigate themselves, and that's exactly what they do in Champaign. And in Champaign, by the time they bring it to the Citizen Review Subcommittee, it's presented by the Lieutenant for Professional Standards. He's already come to his conclusion, which, surprise, almost always is in favor of the police officer. That's certainly how it's been in my situation. I'm waiting on the conclusion of a third complaint I filed, but it doesn't work. It's not realistic to expect the Citizen Review Board in Champaign to weigh in on the investigation and say it's objective, it's thorough, it's fair, and impartial when they get only get the view of the police officer. I've never been offered mediation, which is supposed to be part of it. I've never been told the date that my complaints will be investigated. I've never been asked to be a part of that.
So,
And I'm a middle-aged white woman, clearly. So the point I've tried to make in Champaign is that I'm a middle-aged white woman. I might have more resources than the average person. I have a college degree. My father was an attorney. I have a degree in journalism. I know how to research. I know how to be persistent. I can't crack the code. So what would that mean for someone who perhaps is poor or homeless or of color or all those things? It doesn't mean they don't have legitimate issues to bring before, the review board. It just means that there's no trust there, and they're not even going to bother. Why would they bother?
So I think what you're saying is that if, as you know, we can't do anything about what Champaign does, but you're seeing that the process is very similar in the neighboring cities rather than Champaign. I mean, it's not just Champaign. In our process in Urbana, I think there's a certain number of cases that bubble up, and that we would deal with. I think you are correct in that. The first step is to put in a complaint to the police department, and then the chief or someone he assigns, because it's for the public too, and then the chief does the investigation, and when the citizen is unhappy with the results of that recommendation, then it comes to us. Am I interpreting our process?
That is correct.
And therefore, in a way, the process for us in Urbana is set up in such a way that both the citizen complaining and then the police can have their own take on the complaints and what investigates, and then it would come to us if there is a disagreement. That is, if the citizen is unhappy with the investigation, then it would automatically come to us, and we would review the case.
Sure. Could I respond to that?
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to know how many complaints per year actually, after they're decided by the police chief, how many actually go to mediation? In other words, how many actually get to you?
How many come to us? Perhaps, I've been here, in fact, today I'm chairing because I'm the oldest, if you will, on the committee, but perhaps one a year.
One a year that's
Well, those
comes to you, or how many a year do you actually get?
hold on. Those are two separate things, as I understand. What goes to mediation and what goes to us are two different things.
No, I'm not asking about mediation. I'm asking about how many of the complaints that citizens file that the police chief investigates and comes to a conclusion on, how many of those reach you?
Like I
So
said.
that's a question for these folks.
Since we started, well, hello, by
Hi.
the way. Since we started, we've had two that actually came as an appeal, because it doesn't just automatically come to this board. The person has to appeal the process, and once it does, then it turns into a situation where the person has their piece to come back and say why they disagreed with the findings, provide any additional witnesses or information to back their claim, and then the investigating lieutenant or whoever was deemed by the chief to be the investigator would come and provide their side as well, and then a determination will be made from this board to either go back and kind of review, they agree, they disagree, and that recommendation goes to the mayor and the chief after that.
Right, so I understand. So you said number two? That's how many for this year have made it to you guys? Or since 2011 when you started? That's what I'm asking. How many have you had per year, and then how many of each per year have made it to your group? Because most people, in my opinion, give up. When they get a answer, it's just too much work. It's too much hassle. It's too much trouble.
Since 2008, we've had 2.
That's absurd. That's
Okay.
comical.
You're right in that it's a small amount.
It's ridiculous.
Except that, and having been here for a while, the purpose is that to give the citizens an alternative. The number of complaints that come in is one that we don't control. It's the number of people that are unhappy with however way they were treated by the police. But,
Of course.
But there's a procedure for them to follow to appeal if they're unhappy with the results.
But I just said that in my, so
So it's
It's
a
not
value
exactly like
judgment of
champ-
what a good number is. It doesn't. There is no necessary good answer as to how many
well,
would come
if
up.
you've
to
only
any
had
case.
2 people come before the Civilian Review Board since 2008, and the board was only, your board, I believe, was started in 2011, am I correct? 2008? Okay, that's even worse. That's telling me that there's no trust there, that people,
It's telling me that either people don't want to go through the process,
exactly.
or
It's a
that
hassle.
there are not complaints, and that we have a decent police department.
I disagree strongly with
Well-
that. If you had trust with the community, then people would feel free to come forward and engage with the police and file complaints, and then they would feel free to then challenge the result if they weren't happy with it.
I would say that we are also part of this board means that we are open to comments from people that know us, we are regular people in the community, and that people can approach us as to whatever they're unhappy with the process or happy with it. In my experience is that people tell me, you know what, that works. And if there were people that were unhappy with the process, we're enough spread in the community
the
that
young
they
man
would come
standing
to us.
behind me has filed complaints here, and I can tell you he's not happy. And I have come in a couple months ago to get the information packet on how do I file a complaint. And first I was said, oh, well, what is it, the complaint? Then, oh, do you want to talk to a sergeant? And I said, no. Then I said, can I get the packet? And I finally got the packet, and when I asked, well, how many days do you need before you can file, she told me, oh, it's open-ended. I said, really? Because I thought it says on your website that it's 45 days. So what's on your website does not match, at least then, what's in the packet of information. That's a pretty big discrepancy, because she said, she told me, oh, I've never known any complaint that was filed later than 45 days not to be reviewed.
What happened on that particular day? We have
No,
procedures, and if we have
that's-
discrepancy, it's
That's
nice
a huge,
to be pointed out.
So if somebody walks in, is what I'm telling you, if somebody walks in and wants to know how to file a complaint, and they're questioned, like, oh, well, why what is the complaint? Do you want to talk to a sergeant? Right away, in my experience, because I experienced that, I felt like they're trying to talk me out of it. Like, why
we can't speak to a situation that is hypothetical in the case of If
Okay,
there are
I'm tell-
people
I'm
that have a
telling you
complaint,
you're
Yeah.
arguing with me, and I'm,
Yeah,
I'm telling you my experience, and you don't want to.
We are arguing with, we as a group, but, I'd like us to stop. The purpose of this, as I understand,
Okay.
is to hear from the citizens.
Okay.
I'm not asking you to stop, I'm saying I'd like us to stop with the debate. So thank you for your comments. What I heard, and I want to make sure that I understand, is that you don't trust a system that doesn't include civilian oversight and civilian involvement in the initial complaint,
Yes.
right? You don't trust a system that yields only 2 appeals in over a 10-year period.
Yes.
You know, that's 2 sources of data that concern you, and you would like to see the city review that policy and have and revise that policy to create more citizen involvement from the start.
Yes, and I have a degree in journalism. I know how to research,
Yep.
and I have my own 3 experiences with Champaign to draw from, and also my experience walking in Champaign, or excuse me, walking into the Urbana Police Station.
Yeah.
I only speak from my experience. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
okay. Anybody else? Or you want to speak, sir?
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Christopher Hansen. I'm the young man that she mentioned. I've also been thoroughly involved with the Champaign Police review process for the last probably 8 months. Everything Ms. Closest just said is fairly accurate, and based on the response I've seen just now, I'd like to suggest that this board is ridiculously out of touch. Mr. Diaz, you seem highly defensive of the police department. This isn't just theoretical suggestions. I don't know anyone who thinks this process results in anything useful at all. Except the only people I've ever heard advise going through this process is perhaps council members themselves. But everyone else seems to think it's useless. So I do. And so I'm not a theoretical example. I live a few blocks away. I've been through the process, and I'm about to tell you about that. First of all, I've watched some of your meetings before, and from comments from the board members, I get the impression maybe you're frustrated that you're not hearing what complaints are about. I think I heard Dossett ask specifically in the last meeting, like, at least, I forget the officer who was sitting here, tell us what the complaints were about, what was the nature of the complaints or something like that, and he didn't even get an answer to that. And you guys aren't hearing complaints. 2 in 10 years, I think, is the figure we arrived at. That's not an indication that the police department is perfect. That it's absurd to suggest that that's one of the possibilities. What does your police department have? Something like 30,000 interactions per year? Does that sound right? Something like that? Tens of thousands. So we're talking about 300,000 interactions. 2 of them resulted in people unhappy. That's not even a reasonable consideration. You probably have hundreds or thousands per year where people were relatively unhappy with the outcome and didn't want to go through the complaint process. So the question is why. Now, I can be off by an order of magnitude on my figure. It could be hundreds of upset people or thousands, but it's not 0.03 per year. I'm certain of that. Does anyone disagree with me? Okay. Why don't people submit complaints? First of all, you have a time limit on your complaint process. That's a huge problem. It's 45 days. It seems reasonable, right? Well, no, not when your police department doesn't fill FOIA requests for 3 months. So I don't even have the data I need for several months to submit an intelligent complaint until I'm well out of the complaint period. That's not good. First of all, it's not good in 2 different ways. First of all, it doesn't let me submit to complaint. Second, your police department to have been so late in filling a FOIA request has to have violated state law. So they've now committed a state crime, and I can't submit a complaint. That's doubly bad. Does that make sense? Okay. So I've submitted a complaint, and it got denied because I was apparently out of the 45-day period. The thing is, I was well within the 45-day period if you actually count the time when the police department gave me the documents I asked for. And part of my complaint was that they failed to follow FOIA because it took them months to deliver the documents. That complaint was denied. It never even went through the process. You guys will never have a chance to see it because according to the police department, I didn't file it fast enough. I don't know how many of these happen, but there's at least one, and I know it because I submitted it, that you guys will never see and you guys will never hear. As far as I understand it, at least part of my complaint was submitted exactly as it should have been within the 45 days by the ordinance. The claim of the police department is that a different part of the complaint was before the 45 days. This is silly. Why would we want to do that? Why would we not want to hear the complaint? Is there a reason? The only one I can think of is that the police department doesn't want to be a part of this process. I had a different complaint with the Urbana Police Department that I did submit within the right amount of time, and I was not happy with their findings, and I considered appealing it and going through the process so you guys would have seen it. But I could not get the actual findings in their completion from the police department. I got a redacted version which had paragraphs and sentences taken out, and so I actually could not see what it is that the findings were. I could see part of them. And it was pretty clear to me from the parts that were redacted, and I'm still fighting with Todd about this. We're into months now, and I'm arguing with the Illinois Attorney General just to try to get that document. And let's put this into perspective. Your process is a citizen submits a complaint. It goes to someone assigned by the chief, I suppose, I'm not sure, and they look through it and they submit a report, and they give that to the chief, and the chief responds back to the complainant. Well, first of all, the chief didn't give me that report. I had to ask for it, and I had to ask more than once. And they gave it to me late. So, I mean, when I asked for that complaint, that was a legal FOIA request. Well, I did not get that filled within the correct amount of time for a FOIA request. When I got it, it was incomplete. So I wouldn't even know exactly what it is I'm appealing. So how am I supposed to go through the process if I don't have what I need? The process is broken right there. Why Todd doesn't want to give me that document, I think I understand, and I think it's because of the way the review process works. Police officer looks at the complaint, and I've seen this both in Urbana and with Champaign, and they try to reframe it in the way that makes the police officers look best and the complainant look bad. And that's the way it's framed for themselves internally and if it goes to you, so that it can be framed in the best way for the police department. I'm not gonna appeal that and go forward. I don't want to participate in a process where decisions are made about my character and my character is attacked behind closed doors and I don't get to participate. There's no way I'm going to appeal that. I'd be foolish to do so. So that's why I didn't bother. I've emailed Vasilia Clark half a dozen times. She's ignored all those emails. I tried to appeal the complaint that apparently wasn't accepted because I felt I'd submitted it within 45 days. Those emails were ignored. I emailed this board with some of my concerns, I think a month or two ago or 3 months ago, I can't remember, and I got one response from Scott Dossett, and it was kind of a non-response, and he said he would get back to me, and then he didn't. So I don't know who else I'm supposed to go to, but the board isn't answering me, Vasilia Clark isn't answering me, Todd Rent is just blowing my FOIA requests out of the water. I can't get anything from this city. You are the least open entity in Champaign County. I thought the county was bad. I thought the city of Champaign was bad. I thought UIUC was bad. When I started submitting FOIA requests to the city of Urbana, you guys are terrible. You won't give anything. And you'll give things about citizens, but you won't give anything about city staff or elected officials. You protect yourselves like crazy, and it just stinks of corruption. It's really bad. I don't think you guys really understand what it's like to go through the... Have any of you submitted FOIA requests? Have you tried to submit a police complaint? Have you gone through the steps or anything like that?
I have submitted FOIA requests, but
And-
not under a complaint to the police department.
And a FOIA request, when you submit it, it's supposed to be filled in 5 days, but that's 5 business days after you first submit the request. So it ends up turning into a week. And then almost half or more than half the time they submit an extension, which just makes it 10 business days or a full 2 weeks. And then you often get your request denied at the end of the 2 weeks, in which case you try to appeal to the Illinois Attorney General. That takes weeks, months, and years. I have appeals with the Attorney General that are multiple years old now and still haven't been filled. So 45-day requirement on a police complaint, what's the point? What's the purpose? And also, yeah, your staff are actually telling people that there isn't a 45-day requirement. They're either lying or they don't know what the rule is, and then I've gone to the front desk and been able to submit a complaint on one occasion, and then a different occasion I went back and they wouldn't take it because I didn't have my driver's license with me, so I had to leave and come back. I don't know what the point of that was. I'm at the front desk at the police station. There are security cameras everywhere. I'm not going to submit a fake complaint under a fake name. I don't know what the point of sending me away was except to intimidate me to not submit a complaint. I'd never heard of anyone asking for a proof of ID. I even offered to the person they could look me up on Facebook right then, and she said, no, you have to come back. So, well, that's where it stands. I've submitted complaints to Urbana and Champaign, met with both boards at this point, met with the chair of the Champaign Police Review Board multiple times, spoke there multiple times, spoke to Champaign Human Relations Commission. Champaign Citizen Review Subcommittee and the Champaign HRC Human Relations Commission have voted unanimously to completely eliminate all time limits on police complaints, to involve the citizens to a great extent, meaning the citizens can come back in and speak with the panel, and to make it more accessible for all citizens to submit complaints. So you don't have to go to the police station. You could go, I mean, their idea is almost anywhere, a library, whatever. It's rather intimidating, actually, to go to the police station and get walked back into the interrogation room and talk with an officer who, from my perspective, is doing his very best job to reframe what I'm saying to make me look like a bad guy. So that's why you're not getting complaints. That's why you're getting, you know, 1/100th of 1% of every police interaction as a complaint, because virtually no one wants to go through it. Maybe you guys would like to change that, make your board more useful. That'd be great.
What,
So-
excuse me, what location did you say has made that change?
Those changes haven't been made. They've been voted on unanimously by the City of Champaign
City of Champaign, okay.
Citizen Review Subcommittee and the Human Relations Committee. So whether or not the council, I don't think the council will do it because they're apparently afraid to do anything involving the police department there, which looks poor on them. I don't know why. So.
And then also just a follow-up question. You say that you emailed and Mr. Scott responded back to you. I possibly believe I'm fairly new on the board, and I don't think my information was updated on there.
guessed that. Could you guys actually, are there new members? Could you announce that now? Maybe after I speak now or after I've left would be
No,
great.
I mean, my name is Darius White. I've joined the board in June. And I believe maybe my information wasn't on the website. I just wanted to see, based off what you've provided us today, is that email any different? I mean, because I would love to have a copy of that email and possibly respond.
I'll
But-
check on my phone 5 minutes from now and see
Okay.
if I emailed you, and if not, I'll
Okay.
send it to you. So.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
Thank you for coming in and sharing your comments with us. It's definitely useful feedback for me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also think this is good feedback. Especially, there are some points that made that I think we ought to discuss or put them on our plan to figure out what is it that happens when somebody requests information on how to file a report. And I think that's also your job to double check, I mean, from the staff perspective, what is happening and what training there is there. On the other hand, I think that it's not a bad idea to consider some of these suggestions as to what limits, what blocks, what makes this process any harder than it should be. That is, we're here, I think, to make the situation better for citizens and for police. Whenever there's feedback to the police, you know, it's well intended in that we make things better, right? For both citizens and police. When the citizenship is happy, there is better trust and therefore a better police department in the end. So, but I think that we ought to record, you know, we don't do anything outside this meeting when it, you know, to convene. We have to do it here. So I think that maybe we ought to enlist or make a list of these things and discuss them openly. I believe that there no harm in us examining what our process is and come back to with the information as to what is the training, what do people get when they ask for it, and how can we improve the process. So, any other comments?
No, Mr. Vice Chair.
Okay.
I do have one suggestion. You know, there was sort of a mix of facts and statements, or there were a mix of facts and statements that were made. I think it may be helpful to try and sort of set forth at least our understanding of what occurred in reference to those statements that were made.
Yeah, to Chris's particular cases, yeah.
And try
And
to-
then there's,
try to
and
lay
then
that
there's
out
the
for you all
process,
so
yeah.
that you have it rather succinctly, maybe for the next meeting.
Yeah.
So that you can see, at least from our perspective, from the perspective of city staff, exactly what was done and exactly why whatever was done was done. I think it might be helpful to have that perspective.
So I think it would be helpful. On the other hand, Chris, I think it would be a good opportunity for you to elevate it, whatever the procedure is, to make the appeal so that we are able to also request that information to see the full detail. Until you make the appeal itself, at least on one of those cases, it is beyond us except to watch it, but not to bring it and fully discuss. Let me, well, clarify rules.
Yeah, I apologize. I don't want to get in a back and forth. I don't think that that's particularly helpful. I think it's important to make a distinction here between the two filings. There was a filing that was determined to be outside of the statute of limitations that is listed in the ordinance. And as the ordinance states, it's within 45 days of the events giving rise to the complaint, or in the case where the individual is physically unable to file within 15 days of their ability to file. And so that was a filing and a complaint that was dealt with as, yeah, it's just beyond the statute of limitations. The second one, however, and I don't know if I want to refer to it as the second one, but the other complaint, it's my understanding that that was filed. It was filed in a timely manner. It was under review and investigated. I'm not certain whether or not there's been a finding, but at such time that there is a finding, if there hasn't been, then it would still be covered by the rules of the ordinance. It's just following the rules of the ordinance.
So in which case, once that determination is made and the citizen involved would receive it, they can immediately then request an appeal according to the ordinance, right?
So is it, and maybe I shouldn't ask this, but is it the case that you've received a finding from the chief on that case, and that it's, that there's been an appeal that's been denied in the second case, not the one?
No,
with
you've
the
refused to
statute
give me
of
the entire report on that case. I don't have the whole report from
Okay.
you. You've
And-
given it to me, and you've blacked out a bunch of sections, and I've appealed it to the Attorney General, and now it's months later, and we're still arguing about it.
So again, I don't want to get him back and forth because, and I am an incredibly argumentative person, and I'm happy to go back and forth, but I don't want to take up anyone's
I would
time
love a
here.
back and forth. I've been trying to communicate with your office for months. You
Yeah,
guys
but
refuse to
that's
respond to me.
just not
sometimes.
This is not the right forum for that.
So I think it's enough to say.
But
what
it
we
is,
said,
I
yeah.
think, there are two parts. There's a
Yes.
procedural, and then there is particular case. And I understand that that the particular case needs enough details. So my suggestion is that if you appeal from whatever you've got, it automatically elevates it so that we can see the full.
I don't have the full report on that case to the repeal.
That could be
and
the
I'm
grounds.
beyond- I'm
Not
beyond-
that I want to give you advice, but that would be grounds enough to elevate it and say, I don't have enough to report, so I'm appealing until I get to see.
Oh, I'm beyond
whatever it
the
is.
appeal period, obviously, at this point. On the other case where, yeah, there's an ordinance that specifies 45 days, but there's also state law that specifies that you need to fill FOIA requests within 5 days. And if you send me video or documents months later, okay, maybe that's fine, but now you've taken away my right to submit a police complaint. I mean, you've violated state law so that I can't follow your ordinance. And then you're saying that, well, the ordinance doesn't allow.
So let me request on that. I think that's a valid procedural side, that if that's what's happening, I also don't think that's fair. And therefore, I would like for us to discuss to see what implications there are when there is not a FOIA responded to timely or whatever else. But that's very much a something that we can impact and start moving right along without knowing the specifics of your case. That is, if there is a time at which information is missing and the clock is ticking that would cause a problem for any complainant, so to separate it from the case. So
I think the
I
answer-
think we ought to see what that is, and if it happens, or if it can happen, we ought to remedy that.
I think the response you're going to get from the police department in the city is that the complainant doesn't really need to know all the facts. Only the person reviewing the complaint, the lieutenant or whoever does it,
You're
needs
right.
to know the facts. But that's not correct. The complainant does need to have those documents, have that video, so that they can make an intelligent complaint and state it properly. So you won't hear any of my complaints so far because we're past the time limits. And I kind of wonder, since you're going to get a lot of pushback on any of these suggestions, because the police department does not want to hear complaints. They've made that clear. I wonder what you suggest citizens do next when your process fails. Where should I go next? Should I litigate? Should I go to the press? What's the suggestion there? So I'll sit back there.
All right. Well, I think we have several suggestions before us that I think we should bring back. One, because it doesn't make sense to have obstacles for people to file a complaint so that it's considered fully, right? And so if you guys don't mind, as members of the board, to say, is there any particular fault in the ordinance as it is written that does not include cases to come before us? I think we're all open to listening and examining cases as needed, and that's why we're here. And therefore, we ought to make sure that the cases can come before us and that there are no obstacles. So that's the procedural question. I am very interested in following up. If what motivates a person to come all the way here to a meeting is frustration with cases, and in that circumstance, we should find out more. There is no there's no but about that. That's why we're here, right? So, any comments? Should we just summarize as to what our next steps are?
I have a question about possible next steps. It seems like, okay, my understanding is we cannot review the merits of this particular case, but we might look at the procedures. I'm not sure this group is authorized to make even recommendations. I mean, we're still not empowered to make any changes to those procedures. Is there any benefit to this group reviewing the procedures through which complaints are filed and appeals are made?
I think, so in the first two iterations of the ordinance, so the ordinance was passed, I think, in 2007, there was a reauthorization and a reevaluation and reauthorization process in 2009, and then there was another, I think, maybe in 2011. And so that process involved the board reviewing the procedures, reviewing generally the process from a substantive and procedural standpoint, and putting forward recommendations to the city council in terms of the adequacy of those procedures. And so it would seem that that type of review would be somewhat in alignment with that. I mean, you would just provide it to the city council for their consideration. And I'm not speaking as to whether or not I'm just saying that that would be the procedural.
Mikhail, because
procedurally the way
if
to
not
do it.
us, who? If you leave it to a private citizen, they're by themselves on this. I think if we're unhappy with the number of cases or how the
But
procedure
again,
works.
one of the things I would recommend is if, as we were doing that, there was a thorough, comprehensive review that had opportunity for comments from several individuals or several stakeholders. And again, in this case, I think it would be important where you have anyone who comes forward with a story or with a narrative to basically look at that narrative, look at the factual content of that, and make sure that you're seeing it from all of the different sides. And so I think that that's important. And then I think the review of the procedures, subject to having lots of stakeholders come and speak to those questions, I think makes sense to me.
So in light of what you're saying, would the next step be for us to create new business for the next meeting, and then there would be an invitation for public comment to engage this question, to review the procedures, and then we can do that with with you guys telling us, giving us an outline of some of the procedures, and then we can invite comments from the public.
Yeah, and in fact, I think maybe when we did it before, we kind of started with that overview of, these are the procedures, this from beginning to end, and in that type of overview, we could even include sort of FOIA. I mean, it's obviously a much different jurisdiction and a different scope of a different scheme of administration and enforcement, but we can talk about the relationship between the two. Because I think that there is some overlap. I'm not exactly sure that one is necessarily or even should be dependent on the other. But I think we can definitely discuss that, lay out all of those procedures, all of those expectations, and then start the review from that point.
I like it. But, I mean, because this is both an opportunity to make needed changes, but it's also an educational one for us and for the public as to how these things affect them and how they can both suggest changes, but also learn how it's done so that they have their fair day in a case. So that's that side.
So let's,
go ahead.
I move to put this on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay, to get the full reading of the procedure? What is this?
A report from the city about the procedure and a review by this body of that procedure.
Second.
I think that's good enough to put it on the agenda for next time, right? I think as we've done in other cases, when we want to review something, it's good for all of us to read and to start making a list, and then a subgroup starts to generate the specific recommendations, and then bringing it back. So that's a good side. Let me come back then to summarize what can be done as to the specifics of the cases that were mentioned. On the first case, I'm not sure if there's anything to be done at this on the latter end. They may be related. I don't know. But on the second case, we should, if the appeal was not put through in time, is there any grace in the ordinance to say we'd still like to review it? Because you don't know where it is either, because you don't know whether he had gotten a determination. So,
Not to my knowledge. Generally speaking, I think you kind of laid it out. If someone disagrees, I mean, one of the questions is, was there a finding? And I think that's the first question. Has a finding been issued? And what a finding looks like is the chief writes a letter. When there's a complaint that's filed, the chief writes an initial letter saying, we filed a complaint.
This is what we found, yeah.
We're notifying you, and we're going to try to get this completed within maybe 45 days or something like that, right? But if we don't complete it within that period of time, we're going to check in with you periodically.
Okay.
So that's the initial letter. And then there's the internal investigation in the complaint. There is a report generally that's an internal report that advises the chief as to the salient facts and gives some recommendations in terms of how to deal with it. The facts, or the chief reviews that internal report, then makes a determination and then issues the finding. And what I'm not sure about in this case is whether or not that finding letter, which basically says I've reviewed the complaint and I either find that it's founded, not founded, or there's no finding because there's not enough information, you have the right to appeal this complaint within 30 days. Thank you. Within 30 days, if you so choose to do so, please notify the HRO or the police department in writing. That's the finding letter.
That's right. So in this case, so as to not violate privacy also, we don't have to know the details in public yet, but what we can do is request you to tell us where that second case is, get the information so that we can know where that case is, and if there is a finding date,
Sure.
and if there is necessary for action or at least recommendation from us to see what we can see to get clarity, right?
Right.
Because that would impact also whatever we do with the procedure, right? So if that's okay, can you add that to your list?
Yes.
To report back. Okay. Next, is that okay? everybody?
Before you all move on, I want to make sure that I'm clear with what
Okay.
we're putting on the agenda. One, you all are requesting the policy and how it is written right now for you to start reviewing it so that when you meet at your next quarterly meeting, you'll have an idea of what it is you're going to be speaking about. Is that correct? So you need this stuff in advance.
So we need it in advance, and we need everybody to read it and to comment in light of today's comments if there's any gaps in there that we see already in conflict, but also to learn exactly what it says and if there's any other recommendations.
Right, but you're going to do that at the next meeting. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
make sure, from my perspective, that I have what you all need to be
That's
able
right.
to do what you need to do effectively.
Correct.
At the next meeting. You are wanting on the agenda that you want to look thoroughly at the policy and possibly make suggestions. So you're just going to look thoroughly at the policy. And did I
And
miss
so,
anything
yeah,
else?
so that'll begin it. I'm hoping Ms. Mitchell watches, or as she reads the minutes, then she can also suggest what her next step would be. But I think the first one is for us to see it, and at some point then invite the public to also see it and give their own recommendations.
Okay.
Okay? All right, so that's as to what we would do at the next meeting. It's not until we're in October. It's a December meeting or a January meeting? It's a January meeting. So could you send us at least the link so we can start reading? Because 3 months is a long time to just have it on the hopper.
Mr. Diaz, I believe it's on your secure site
I agree.
as well, so you can go on there and actually get started if you want to start an email train, or like Ms. James said, she can send it out so you have it in your email, and then you can start the trend there. As far as advising changes, if you want to kind of discuss it via email, or is that?
Can't.
We're not
We can't
supposed
do that
to
either.
We can't
do
we can't
everybody,
that.
but what we can do is send our comments to a
You can spend them
centralized
individually.
place.
Correct.
So you're graduating, but
Right.
where else would that be then?
You'll send
Okay,
it
with
to
Preston.
Mr. James.
Yeah,
So
you'll
yeah,
send it
you
to
can
me.
send things directly to him. He can filter them through the HRO department, and the HR department
So
is
he is-
needed to ask, to
as
answer.
to what-
To answer questions if you have questions, if you need clarity in something that you're reading.
All right, so we can start sending in those questions to Preston as we read the ordinance and say this may or may not be working, so we know why it's there or what can be changed,
I suggest
given the current rules.
we use email for clarifying questions, but we don't engage in any substantive discussion or assertions that something is not working or could work better until we meet as a body and can
I
talk to
agree.
each other face to
I
face.
completely agree. So we send in a question, and then the answer is prepared for, but it comes back to this group.
And
Okay.
I think one way you could do it is, again, send it as a single email without attaching everyone else to the HRO site. And then what could be done is, all of those comments that are made on the individual procedures, if you track your comments or if you just make them, what we can do is just combine them all into one document so that everyone can see it, and it'll kind of guide staff as we're preparing the discussion of the procedures, so that it'll help us to understand where there's a lack of clarity or where there are questions.
Good.
We can try to address those in the presentation.
And that in a sense, is publicly available. I guess I want to clarify, we're doing this because we're trying to follow the law as to what we can do
Right.
amongst
And
each
so
others.
the actual discussion document, I think it's important to say, because it's going to be part of the packet, will be released to everyone. I mean, it'll be publicly available. And it will guide, I would imagine it would guide the discussion and the presentation.
Sounds good. So that's number 2. To summarize, I don't want to forget it. I think that we do need some kind of follow-up on how a person is received when they ask for a complaint form. And I don't know whose job that is, but I could see very well that we can go ask and see how it's done. I don't think that staff knows us.
Right.
But
And I will say this, I think I had at least some idea of an incident that occurred. That's rare. I think most of our staff and PSRs are pretty well apprised of the rules and procedures and are typically are very accurate. But also, I know that in the past, there have been brochures at the library and other public places that actually lay out the process pretty clearly, so we can make sure that that we have updated brochures in the library and all around, because you can file with the HRO office, so you don't have to go to the police department. You can file with the police department. There's quite a bit of flexibility there. We just want to make sure that everyone is aware of that and everyone has access to those brochures that give a clear statement of the procedures. Of the
I
filing
agree
procedures.
completely. That ought to be in more places, but I'm interested in particular if there is a staff member that didn't know what to do, that already can do.
I think if that occurred, it's been
Okay,
clarified.
but on the other hand, the other one that concerned me is I do want to know what happens. Must I show ID or not?
It requires a notarization, yes. In order to file, the ordinance requires that the complainant notarize the complaint.
Okay, so let's put that on.
It seems like we're getting into the discussion that we're planning for the next meeting.
Okay, so those are the tasks then to be done. Is there any other business to be had? Okay, we don't have anything on the agenda, so no new businesses, no new business items. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh yeah,
staff
you still
report.
have a report.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, good evening again. I know I said that earlier. So as far as for 2019, we have had 8 actual complaints that were filed to the police department. 2019-01 was filed on April 22nd, 2019. A finding was issued on June 18th, 2019. That incident date was marked as it occurred on April 18th, 2019. The incident type was improper procedure. That occurred on North Cunningham. The complaint was found unfounded. That was an African-American male. The second one, 2019.
Hold on, Preston.
Oh,
What does
sorry.
improper procedure mean?
Well, in the complaint, the individual felt that the officer didn't follow procedure
Okay.
when they had contact with him.
So they're complaining about the officer not treating them according to whatever procedure they perceived as was appropriate.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, I should have paused. Is there any other questions about that one? All right. The second one, 2019-02, was filed on May 10th, 2019. The finding came in on July 12th, 2019. Incident date is listed as 5/10/2019. That one was harassment, intimidation, delayed, slow response, and failure to take action. That was the incident type. That incident occurred on West Illinois Street. That one was unfounded. It was found to be unfounded. That was a Caucasian male. Is there any questions about that one? All right. Go to number 3. Number 3, 2019-03, was filed on July 10th, 2019. The finding is still pending. Incident date is unknown at this time. Wasn't marked on there. Unlawful arrest, harassment, intimidation was the incident type. So the disposition is also pending. That is an African-American male. Any questions about that, since it's a little different, especially?
For the areas where it says unknown, is that just necessarily unknown on your side as far as what information you received?
Correct.
Or, okay.
Yes, that is correct. So that one was 03. So now we'll go to 2019-04. That one, oh, gotcha. That one was filed on July 18th, 2019. The finding date was July 23rd, 2019. The incident date is marked as July 18, 2019. The complaint or incident type is improper procedure. The incident location was a Champaign County jail, and that was an African-American female. Is there any questions about that one?
I do, sorry. So
Yes.
for this wraps up the 4 previous ones, 1 pending, 3 unfounded. For
Correct.
all of these unfounded, no one has a place to appeal.
That is correct.
And for us as a board, we can't do anything in this case unless that appeal comes to us.
That is correct.
Okay.
But to be open about this, how much of that are we allowed to see as individual members? We used to be able to look at the complaints. Is that still true? Todd, it was a while back, and you and me were the only ones
I'm
there.
trying to remember. So I think
I remember coming into the office and
right
seeing the
after,
complaints.
yeah, after the expiration of the appeal process or the appeal filing deadline, then I would imagine that, yeah, that should be something that you should be able to come in and see.
Okay.
They might be redacted in order to protect privacy of the individuals who are filing, but yeah, you should be able to see the substance of
Yeah, I
those.
think I came into your
as the
office
members,
once and
yeah.
saw a list
The,
of
the only reason you wouldn't see them beforehand is that we don't want to,
contaminate
Oh,
the,
yeah,
the
ultimately.
hearing here. So that's a good question. Before we move on to, because they're different, all of these were filed, it seems to me, like within days of when the incident report happened. And so that's a consistency that to me is surprising, because there's 2 in which there was a significant time lapse between incident and filing, which would be it's a different situation, especially in light of what we said today. But keep going on it, and then I have a suggestion.
All right, so the next one is 2019-05. The date that it was filed was July 15th, 2019. The finding date was July 26th, 2019. And the incident date was March 12th, 2019. That one, the incident date was listed as harassment and intimidation. That one was on West Illinois Street, and that was a Caucasian male. Do you have any questions about that?
and if I remember correctly, that's the one that was deemed to be outside.
Right. That is, well, just to kind of point of clarification, this particular one was filed on July 15th of 2019, but the incident date occurred in March 12th of 2019, which was outside of the preview, the time frame of the filing period. So that would be one that would be outside. Is there any questions?
No.
All right. So we move on to 2019-06. That one occurred, the filing date was 9/5 of 2019. Do not have a filing date, a finding date currently. The incident date was on July 5th, 2019. That one was failure to take action, incompetence, and intimidation. That one occurred on West Illinois Street. That was a Asian female and a Caucasian male. Do you have any questions about that one? All right. 2019-07, the file date was September 18th, 2019. I do not have a finding date yet. The incident date occurred on September 17th, 2019. The incident type is rudeness. It occurred at the Urbana Walmart. That was a Caucasian male. Any questions? All right. So number 8 is 2019-08. That one was filed on October 10th, 2019. I do not have a finding for that yet. The incident date is listed as 10/10 of 19, which is October 10th of 2019. That one is improper procedure and rudeness is the incident type. That one occurred on West Nevada, and that is an African-American female. Are there any questions about that?
I actually do have a question about the 2019-06 complaint.
Yes.
That would be considered out of time frame as well?
I think it's a 45 business days.
Business
Yes.
day, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So 6, 7, and
think
8
so.
could
It's
still
right
be
on the
open,
line.
Okay.
and so you don't have information, but they could still be in the process of appeal or finding.
That is correct. They are, right.
Okay. Okay, so that concludes the listing of what happened this year as far as complaints put in.
Correct.
2, 4, well, 8. I have a suggestion. As I read these, incident type sounds like to me like somebody's classified it as they read the complaint and said this is, but what it's really is it's more of a claim by whoever filed the complaint, right? Those words
correct.
are what somebody classified as what the complainant was talking about, right?
That is correct.
So for me, it would make sense that it just says incident description or incident claim, and
Okay.
it would help me a lot if it said improper procedure by officer. Because it has the word complaint, claim, it is a claim that that's what they said. Right now, as I read it first at the beginning of the meeting, I saw these, and it seemed like somebody had determined there was an improper procedure. And right
Understood,
now, it's
right.
just a claim, right?
Correct.
But, not to diminish it. And the other one also, for me, would, to clarify the heading of that column, it's complaint disposition by the chief, right?
That's what yes. That's
So-
what the findings were and the
Right.
information that was sent out.
That's
Correct.
right. So for me, it should clarify and say by the chief, because then the column would say that the chief is saying it was unfounded, that the chief was saying that it was pending, right?
The chief is not saying it's pending. Pending means that there hasn't been a determination yet.
Correct. But when there is a disposition, and especially because we're using the word that is already a disposition, that's what the chief is saying. It's unfounded. I agree with you that pending or in a, meaning the reason I'm zeroing in on it is because if it says unfounded, and right here, why would I want to look at it? It's already been determined. And it's been determined at that stage, but not necessarily as that's what, the claim was unfounded. You know what I mean?
I totally understand what you're saying. However, this is very interesting to me because it will help me when I come up with suggestions for when we review the policy, because information that's given over to us like this, even though it's unfounded or anything of that nature, I'm like, what catches my eye is West Illinois Street. There's, out of 7, we have 3 on West Illinois Street. So things like that, I just wish I could have more information, and
Yeah.
I'll understand once I go a little bit more in depth into the policy as to what we can be provided. Because even if we can't receive I'm pretty sure we cannot receive an officer name, but even if you all were to identify them with a number that may not coincide anywhere with their ID number, but you all can break that down, and that went along with it, I would be very curious to see if these are police officers repeating or having complaints about them repetitively. And if that still isn't being seen or discovered in whatever the disposition is, then that's a big red flag right there for me. If it's
I agree with you.
know,
That's
so-
a better that's a more serious red flag than just changing the names of columns. I agree with you. Is there any other comment on the report? Okay. Not being so, then we're done with this report. Are there any other reports from the staff? Are there any, actually, staff reports, but we also left pending at our last meeting that there would be a subgroup to deal with the TASER policy?
As of now, he did reach out to us just to let us know that during the transition, things have gotten a little bit busy on his end, and he did say once things calm down, he will be in contact with us to actually establish that committee. Yeah.
So that's pending too. Okay. Okay, anything else when it comes to reports? All right, announcements, anything that we should teach each other about? I guess I'd like to make an announcement of something that's going on that I think should be of interest to the general community. The New American Welcome Center at the Y is going through an immigrant integration plan process. That is, for the next 5 and 10 years, what do we as community do to help integrate immigrants into our cities? And one of those subcommittees is the public safety work group. Now, the timeline of the integration plan is such that by January, the recommendations will be made. And so if anybody's, that group has met with the chiefs of police, the sheriff's office, and there's several people involved in writing recommendations. But if anybody's interested on the law enforcement side, that committee's open to feedback and to, recommendations, because it's going to come back to, if not us, to the city councils as recommendations as how immigrants can be better integrated and taught about our system. So, university-y, mca.org/welcome. You can find more about it. Okay? All right. And no other announcements? Entertain a motion to adjourn. Excellent.
Second.
And let's all vote by walking. All right. We don't need to complicate that. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you at the next.
Great job, Ricardo.